Hello, I'm Debbie Bell-Hosking here in Stockholm at the Fintech Hub, and I'm talking to Alex Meads. We're talking fintech and the big corporates. Hello, Alex.
Hi there.
Alex, first of all, how do you think the competitive environment for banks is changing?
The competitive element that the banks are seeing now is competition that hasn't previously existed before. We have, financial institutions that have existed for a very, very long time without any element of competition, or in many circumstances, very, very little. What that means is effectively that banks obviously have to work much harder for their money, or for our money. Is that a good thing? Of course it is. Competition breeds new products and new initiatives that are ultimately built with the consumer in mind. And I think that's perhaps something that we've not seen quite as much of as we should have done. Fintech brings a huge amount of new innovation. Obviously, of course, that goes without saying, but there's no reason that banks can't be bringing that innovation and adopting new ideas and new principles, in fact, into their day-to-day kind of working life with, as I say, consumers at the forefront of what they're doing.
So do you think banks can partner with fintechs?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think there's a huge amount of evidence that suggests that that's already happening or already happened. Is there room for that to continue to develop and evolve? Of course it is. As I said before, banks have been unchallenged for hundreds of years. We're not talking, a couple of generations or a couple of decades. We're talking hundreds of years where they've never had to work with anyone. And so partnering is an entirely new environment. And again, it's a very exciting one. I think there are certainly a number of examples that would give some financial institutions, or banks, should I say, reason to be very, very concerned. But I think those that will survive and that will go on to, or kick on to kind of really excel within the financial services space are the ones that really are able to embrace partnering with people and actively seeking out to do so rather than having to be convinced to do so.
So in your opinion, PSD2, threat or opportunity?
I believe it's a two-sided coin. And it also depends on who we're talking about. If we're talking for the banks, it's very much a threat in many situations, in that they're running legacy systems, and it's not as simple as saying open up your data. It's not as simple as that, in that they have to obviously be able to do that through their IT systems. So rather than saying, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing, is it ready, or are we ready for it? Perhaps more importantly, or certainly from the bank's perspective, for the consumer, it's absolutely huge. It revolutionises the whole payments industry. Is that a benefit? Of course it is. It's absolutely massive. It brings us into a whole new kind of frontier of financial services. And as I say, if we consider that financial services is very much an incumbent market, it is purely required. PSD2 is supposedly an argument over data and people fighting over that data in terms of who should have access to it and who shouldn't. One of our partners very recently made a really, really good quote, and it was a big financial institution that said, rather than fighting over the share of the current pie, why don't we make the pie bigger? And if we consider that there are 2 billion people in the world that are unbanked, I think there's a lot of opportunities to make that pie bigger. So why don't we put a bit more focus on that and really embrace the changes that come with PSD2, but actively work together to deal with the problems and the challenges that are along the way of that. Something that I find particularly interesting when we talk to banks and financial institutions, as well as fintech startups, is that startups are actively trying to be more like big financial institutions in the future, and big financial institutions are trying to be more like startups. And so obviously there are huge possibilities for kind of partnership among those two entities. And so I would say that rather than focusing purely on who is a bank and who is a fintech and who is X, Y, and Z, and categorising people into kind of different pigeonholes, why aren't we just referring to them as financial services providers?
Well, on that note, Alex, thank you. That was really insightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching.